Adam Gontier has to be one of the best live vocalists of our generation, helping form one of the greatest alternative rock bands known as 3 Days Grace, who went on to provide the soundtrack of many of our teenage lives. The band was unstoppable, even managing to cross over to the mainstream eye by featuring in the soundtracks of games such as WWE SmackDown vs Raw 2007, bringing a whole new audience to the alternative rock scene. But good things don't last forever, and with Adam leaving the band and being replaced, the band gets a lot of hate from the long-time fans. But why? Well, let's delve exactly into why fans hate this current version of 3 Days Grace.
Let's start a riot, let's start a riot. Let's start a riot, let's start a riot.
Before we get into the drama, we need to learn about their origins. The band started off as a high school project known as Groundswell, with Adam Gontier in charge of vocal duties and both lead and rhythm guitar, Neil Sanderson as the drummer and backing vocalist, and Brad Walst as the bassist. The band formed in 1992, yes, we're all old, and began playing various local gigs and backyard parties around Ontario, Canada. Two other members were in and out of the band at the start, with the band splitting up and reforming between 95 and 97, but the three members I just mentioned are the ones we're going to focus on, as they later went on to form 3 Days Grace. Gontier, Sanderson and Walst reunited in 1997 to create 3 Days Grace. The meaning behind the band's name refers to a sense of urgency. Gontier asks the question, if someone could change something in their life if they only had 3 days to make a change, would they? This theme is reflected in a lot of the band's earlier music. The band continued to do their thing in the local scene, but it wasn't really until they saw a record label in the early 2000s that it really took off. During a move to Toronto, they came across a local producer, and after having found around 7 years worth of material to work with, the producer worked hard to find the golden nuggets according to Gontier, and went on to polish and refine some of these hidden gems to create a demo album to pitch to EMI Music Publishing Canada. This somewhat worked, as EMI liked what they heard but wanted more from the band. So 3 Days Grace hit the studio with their new producer, and the result was the now iconic song I Hate Everything About You.
I hate everything about you. Why do I love you?
And to say it was a hit would be a massive understatement, as suddenly, the band was overwhelmed with record label offers before ultimately signing with Jive Records to start working on their debut self-titled album, 3 Days Grace. This album is personally one of my all-time favourites. It was really Adam in his songwriting prime with full control over the creativity, and it shows. When researching this video, a quote from Adam really stuck out to me and made me appreciate this album even more, in which he says, "I don't find it easy to write about happy shit. You don't need a release when you're happy." And this self-titled album perfectly reflects that. I mean, just take I Hate Everything About You. The whole song is basically about realizing there's something in your life you're wasting your time on, something Adam and the rest of the band related to at the time. Then you have the anti-conformist lyrics of Just Like You, and the rage-filled Wake Up. It was clear the band was able to draw from their own struggles when writing these songs. But even after all of the newfound success after years of grinding, Adam in particular couldn't overcome these struggles. Sometime around the tour to promote the self-titled album, Adam became addicted to a drug called Oxycontin, a powerful painkiller known to be extremely addictive. Adam actually recently spoke about this in an interview with Rockfeed. The whole interview is a great watch, but here's a clip of the man himself talking about his struggles during those times.
Was it alcohol you were just drinking a lot? And
That was pills, and yeah, no, it was not really alcohol. It was more pills than anything. Yeah.
was there a point for you where you're like, fuck, I'm partying too hard and I need to stop?
Well, there was between the first record and 1X. So shortly before we had to start the process for 1X, I went into treatment in Toronto, and yeah, but I got out of that and then got back on the road and was sober for a while, and then
It's super conflicting because, on the one hand, the self-titled album was some of their best work, and knowing the backstory of this album just adds a whole new layer of depth. Knowing that it wasn't just your typical angsty rock band lyrics, but actually a diary letting us into the real-life struggles the band was going through at the time. On the other hand, it came at the cost of Adam's mental health in particular, resulting in a rehab stint to overcome his addiction, all while fueling the fire for the next album that was even more personal and emotional. The album we all know now as 1X. The band got back together once Adam was out of rehab to create, at least in my opinion, an absolute masterpiece of an album. As I mentioned before, this album was just pure, raw emotion, with the band really pushing the message that no matter how shit things are right now, push through it and it will get better. I mean, I don't even have to say anything. Just listen to Never Too Late and you'll understand my point.
We try to just stay alive. Maybe we'll turn it around, 'cause it's not too late. It's never too late.
Adam even wrote some of those lyrics for songs such as Animal I've Become, Riot and Never Too Late while in rehab, drawing from that tough experience and letting it all out in his music. I'll be honest too, this album was my first introduction to 3 Days Grace, and funnily enough, it was from playing the OG SmackDown vs Raw 2007 game that I heard both Animal I Have Become and Riot, two of the standout songs from that album.
Somebody help me take the
And it seems I wasn't the only one either, as this absolutely catapulted the band into the mainstream eye, bringing a ton of new fans, but also expectations for the record label, which in my personal opinion, this started the downfall of this version of 3 Days Grace. When a band hits the mainstream, normally one of two things happen. They either use it as motivation to build and grow upon what they've already created, and with support from the record labels, are given even more time to polish and refine their product. Or you have the other option, where the record labels see the success and create new expectations and boundaries within the band, switching the focus from creating the best music to creating music that is radio friendly and therefore more profitable. And unfortunately, the later happened with 3 Days Grace. I'll just say it, I can't stand the Life Starts Now album. I mean, even just thinking back now, I wouldn't even be able to name you one song from that album. It was forgettable, but why? How did they go from the Breakout 1X to this? Well, I think a few things happened. This was their last album on Jive Records, and seeing the success of the last one, I think the record label placed a lot of pressure on the band to move on to a more radio-friendly fan base to try and reach a larger audience. And this, rightly so, pissed off Adam. This album just lacked any emotion, and all the songs sound like they were written to tick boxes and be radio-friendly, a complete contrast to what we had with the last few albums. Jive Records ultimately ended up closing, leading the band to being handed to RCA Records for their next album, and this is when everything completely started to fall apart for the band. If you thought the record label expectations were bad on Life Starts Now, this amplified tenfold moving over to the titans that are RCA Records, and it shows in the Transit of Venus. To me, this album just feels like a big fuck you from Adam to the record label, which conveniently was his final album with 3 Days Grace. I mean, just look at some of the track titles. Anonymous feels like Adam is a stranger in his own band, having his creativity completely stomped on by the powers above with something he created. Happiness seems more aimed at the rest of the band, hinting that they may be happier about their current situation while he's drowning his sorrows. And finally, the most obvious, Expectations, with the chorus feeling like it was a direct shot at the record label.
In a small town, no scene. Turns out it was nothing but a pipe dream. Expectations go to hell.
Transit of Venus was Adam's last album with 3 Days Grace, and as a 3DG fan, it's just sad to see him go out that way. Adam's legacy with the band was tarnished, with the record label stifling the band's creativity to try and replace it with mainstream success. In doing so, it took away everything that fans loved about the band. The struggles, the rawness of the lyrics, pretty much everything. Many fans felt that this would be the end of 3DG, but in stepped Matt Walst, the younger brother of the band's bassist Brad Walst, and he had the envious job of trying to replace Adam Gontier, an almost impossible task, and one that led to a ton of hate being thrown towards the new 3DG frontman. Now, this period was a bit of a weird time for 3DG fans, as you were in limbo. Do they follow Adam to his new band? Do they stay loyal to a band that meant so much to them over the years? It kind of felt like you were cheating on your partner, and was a shitty situation either way. When I say this decision split the fan base, that would be an understatement, as you either loved or hated the new sound that 3 Days Grace began creating. For me, it was by no means a bad thing, but I just personally couldn't connect to the band the same way that I could with Adam fronting them. Matt is a great vocalist, but there was just something missing. And when making this video, the phrase that keeps popping into my head is realness. Listening to the old 3 Days Grace felt like you were listening to an audiobook of a diary that just happened to have incredible instrumentals instrumentals alongside it. Whenever I watch Matt perform live, even as recent as last year, I just feel like he's overly theatrical, which isn't a bad thing, don't get me wrong. It's just such a drastic change from the raw emotion we came to expect with the old 3 Days Grace. Matt had the unenviable task of stepping into Adam's shoes, and fans direct a ton of hate towards him for the band's drastic change in sound. But let's not forget that Matt isn't the only member of the band. In fact, during his last album, Adam made it pretty clear that the rest of the band was more aligned with the record label's vision to go more mainstream. So I think fans really need to take that into account. Despite what we were told initially, Adam definitely did not leave the band on good terms. And it's only years later that we start uncovering the truth behind the real reasons Gontier left 3 Days Grace. Transit of Venus really was the beginning of the end for Adam, as his creativity began being stifled due to record label pressures. And also, I'm only just now realising that he could have been strong-armed out too. As for the albums before Transit of Venus, it was only ever the band who had songwriters credits. But then suddenly for this album, there were way more chefs in the kitchen, likely adding to Adam's frustration with the band at the time. Adam cited his initial departure from the band in late December 2012 due to health reasons, but I think there was way more to it. He began a solo career in early 2013 and it even began touring, so it doesn't really add up. Adam went on to form Saint Asonia, which in a weird way is more similar to 3 Days Grace than the actual band now, but it was clear Adam still held some form of resentment towards his previous colleagues. During a 2016 interview, Gontier spoke about how he's still in contact with most of the band members, but specifically said he had no desire to speak to Neil, the drummer of 3 Days Grace.
Yeah, there's no hard feelings whatsoever, and Brad and Barry and I talk a lot.
Good.
I don't necessarily talk to Neil at all. I don't really have any need to or desire to talk to Neil ever again. So,
but this story has a happy ending, as Adam took to Instagram to post this photo, going on to say that he finally got to sit down and break bread with Neil after 10 years, giving fans a glimmer of hope that a potential reunion could be on the horizon. And this is exactly what happened, as Adam joined 3 Days Grace live on stage numerous times to perform some of their classics alongside his replacement Matt in 2023. Also, you have to give him credit. Fair play to Matt for putting his ego aside to allow Adam to give this beautiful moment to the fans. But even now, in 2024, 12 years later, fans still can't let it go. And every video of Adam with the band is full of comments full of hatred towards Matt and wishing Adam was back in the band. Full transparency, yes, I do think the band was better with Adam in it, but that's over and done with. Saint Asonia isn't half as big as they should be. To direct that same energy towards Adam's new project, instead of throwing hate towards 3 Days Grace. Adam's departure and Matt's replacement will always be seen as controversial no matter how you look at it. And if you enjoy controversy, you'll enjoy this video from the channel breaking down probably one of the most controversial artists in our scene.